but it won't be like public or anything. Okay, so thank you everyone for joining this morning for the Parsha study. I feel like the book of Vayikra or Leviticus is always hard to do because it's like, more sacrifices, leprosy, what am I gonna do? So I'm focusing on something that the story that I find really interesting, and basically focusing, to be honest, on the first verse of this Parsha, but we'll be developing the idea from that first verse. So so like last time that I did this with you guys, I do a study. So meaning we'll read sources together, and then I have a few questions. So that's my style. I know that you have people with a bunch of different styles here as well, which is very cool. But that's what I'm doing today. So I'm gonna share a source sheet, and I have to figure out which one is the source sheet. Okay, one moment, because I have two documents with the same name. Okay, I think it's this one. Yes, okay, good. Great. So I put the Hebrew and the English, but you can just read the English. We'll be reading the first 10 verses. I can make it bigger also so that you guys can see. Okay, and I'll scroll down. So does anybody want to read the first 10 verses? It seems long because of the Hebrew as well, but this is the first 10 verses.
Sure, I can do it.
Okay.
The Lord spoke to Moses after the death of the two sons of Aaron, who died when they drew too close to the presence of the Lord. The Lord said to Moses, "Tell your brother Aaron that he is not to come at will into the shrine behind the curtain, in front of the cover that is upon the ark, lest he die, for I appear in the cloud over the cover. Thus only shall Aaron enter the shrine with the bull of the herd for a sin offering and a ram for a burnt offering. He shall be dressed in a sacral linen tunic with linen breeches next to his flesh, and be girt with a linen sash, and he shall wear a linen turban. They are sacral vestments. He shall bathe his body in water and then put them on. And from the Israelite community he shall take 2 he-goats for a sin offering and a ram for a burnt offering. Aaron is to offer his own bull of sin offering to make expiation for himself and for his household. Aaron shall take the 2 he-goats and let them stand before the Lord at the entrance of the tent of meeting. And he shall place lots upon the 2 goats, one marked for the Lord and the other marked for Azazel. Aaron shall bring forward the goat designated by lot for the Lord, which he is to offer as a sin offering, while the goat designated by lot for Azazel shall be left standing alive before the Lord to make expiation with it and to send it off to the wilderness for Azazel.
Okay, that's it. Thank you. So the purpose, I did put all 10 verses because I'm going to focus on the first verse, but I also want it to be aware how the Torah continues after this first verse. So 2 weeks ago, I don't know what you guys spoke about, but 2 weeks ago, the main story that took place in the Parasha was the death of the 2 sons of Aaron, Nadav and Avihu, who sacrificed a weird sacrifice or a strange fire, and then died. And then we had Tazria and Mitzorah, these 2 parshas that, I'll stop sharing. We had these 2 parshas that spoke about leprosy and about, various, when you're pure and impure and various situations that that are like that. And then finally, we reached to Acharei-Mot Kedoshim, and the first verse mentions the 2 sons of Aaron once again, when we had not heard about them in the past 2 parshas. And then it's just a brief mention because what we hear afterwards is actually what Aaron has to do on Yom Kippur. Okay, it's the most holy day of the year, and this is the beginning of the process of what he would have to do for Yom Kippur. So I want to ask you your opinion about why do you think there's a mention of the sons of Aaron when it happened, 3 parshas ago, 2 weeks ago, because we combined 2 parshas last week, and there's this whole break in the middle, and then there's just a brief mention before it continues on again. So what do you think the mention is? And think about like the subjects as well that they were spoken about during this time, but any opinion or thought would be welcome. So I'm interested to hear what you think. Oh, Wendy, you just need to unmute.
What we just read, was that a warning? Was that?
It's the beginning of what the high priest, the Kohen Gadol.
Didn't it say, but didn't it tell Aaron not to draw too near? And wasn't that part of what Nadav and Avihu did?
Yeah.
So maybe that's why it's a mention again.
Okay, so that
and
also we could think that like Yom Kippur it's the only day that he goes into the Holy of Holies as well, right? So that's a good idea. Any other ideas as well?
Well, sort of an instructional guide of how to do it. So, I mean, it's interesting that I don't know if anybody here is doing the Daf Yomi, but the tractate that's under study now is Yoma, which is for Yom Kippur. And there's a whole lot of discussion of what's happening and how the high priest should prepare himself and what needs to be done. So this is probably part of that. Because the high priest has to be pure.
So what do you think is the connection with mentioning the death of the two sons of Aaron?
Well, he needs to keep himself above everything and pure. And he can't take a chance of doing anything incorrectly.
So you think it's just to mention in order for him to be, above that and be pure in that case?
I think it's part of that. There may be something else beyond that, but that's certainly part of it.
Okay. Yeah, Nancy.
Well, so it's God telling Moses to tell Aaron this. I think it basically is letting him know why he killed his sons, because this was after it. So, why he killed them, to give him a reason, because Aaron didn't ask.
Right. So his response was being silent. So so you think it was as if it was offered to him in that case. Because it is interesting, because it's not God telling Aaron, it's God told Moses who told Aaron.
Yeah.
I like that. Any other thoughts? Okay, so I'm going to share a few commentaries about that first verse. So to explain what other, known commentators have thought why this mention is basically there. So I'll go back to the page. Okay. So I only brought 3, but I'll mention basically, I brought this because they're different. And I'll mention what others generally said. So I'll just mark that. Okay. Does someone want to read the first one of Ibn Ezra?
I'll take a turn, Netta.
Yeah, thank you, Leslie.
Okay. After the death, after God warned Israel not to incur the death penalty, in Leviticus 15:31, he also told Moses to caution Aaron not to die as his sons died. And see Leviticus 10:1 and 2. This section is proof that the sons of Aaron brought the incense within the veil.
So this is similar to what Wendy and Steve were saying. Yeah, that it was connected to what they did, and it was telling him, or even what Nancy said, like why they died, and also that he shouldn't do it himself regarding his own practice now. Can someone read about Banel? And these two are my translation because it was originally in Hebrew. So I kind of, Sharon, do you want to read?
Read.
Yeah.
Barbanel, my translation.
So it's just
because God was explaining the work to be done on Yom HaKippurim, he was specific about things to be concerned and worried about, including the mention of the strange sacrifice that was done for God. As this is a unique and special day, it was worth and important to mention this as well.
Okay, so that just adds a different layer, that considering that the Yom Kippurim was being explained afterward, it's important to mention it once again in the beginning of this Parsha. So that's what Abarbanel says. And last, we have Bechor Shor. So can read that?
Do I read the next one?
You can read it as well. Yeah, that'd be great. So this is also my translation. Yeah.
My translation, after the death of the two sons of Aaron, the Torah specified all the reasons that would cause death in God's temple, being impure in various situations, going drunk into the temple, etc. But it was mentioned once again here, as this was the reason that Nadav and Avihu were killed. Specifically, they went too close to God, which God was now commanding Aaron about.
So they're all kind of similar, and they all have to do with the content. So Bechol Shor uses the fact that the previous two parshas were talking about, purity and impurity, and you cannot be drunk when you go into the temple. That the content of the parshas is the reason that it was mentioned once again and brought up. And that those are connected to either commanding Aaron or the Nadav and Avihu story, all connect with additional commandments to the people about how to enter the temple. So I want to leave these three up here, and I want to ask you if there's any one in particular that you like or agree with, or you think that you need to add in some way. What do you think about the commentaries?
Well, I'm not sure I agree with Ibn Ezra.
Okay.
I mean, he says this section is proof that the sons of Aaron brought the incense within the veil. That's not explicitly stated as far as I recall.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that's a hypothetical on his part.
Mm-hmm.
But the other two basically are saying that you have to be pure when you're, going into the into the shrine. So that's sort of self-evident, and these are sort of more details about why and how you can be pure.
But what does that mean?
Sorry,
What does that mean? What does that mean, incense within the veil? I don't know what that means.
So I think it means within the Holy of Holies. They went into that room when they weren't supposed to. Only the high priest goes in, and only on Yom Kippur. So he basically says that because they're talking about immediately afterwards the whole process of what he does on Yom Kippur, it's proof that what Nadav and Avihu did was do the strange fire in the Holy of Holies. Mm-hmm. So Barbanel talks about the content that's in Acharei-Mot Kedoshim, meaning after the mention. And then Bechol Shor talks about it, the in-between, with the previous parshas, and uses that as the reason that it's mentioned once again. Okay. So the different commentaries, and also you guys as well, used the content of the parsha itself in order to explain why it's mentioned again, meaning what was mentioned before, what was mentioned afterwards. And I kind of was also sharing that. I mean, I shared, more the continuation of the parsha to kind of share what's going on, what's next in the parsha, what we had before, what we had in between the mention, which we have in this parsha, and then the story that we had 3 parshiot ago. And I will say a bunch of the other commentaries as well was what Nancy mentioned regarding that it was through Moses. So all the commentaries basically focus mostly either on the content of the parsha or the issue that it was through Moses. And I want to give a different interpretation to what we're reading. I want to say that the mention and the story and where it's placed has to do with Aaron's personal journey and as an individual and as a parent. So before going to the specifics of that, I want to now turn and read a little bit about the Jewish mourning process. When somebody passes away from a first degree, what is the process like? I think that there might be a few people here who have experienced, when a parent passes, and God forbid, I hope you have not experienced when a son, but a parent is different than other first degree family members, sibling, spouse, and son or daughter. So, and we'll talk about that. So I basically created myself a few paragraphs about the mourning process in Judaism to basically connect that to what we're seeing in this parsha. So I'll read the first 2, and then I'll ask somebody else to read the next paragraphs. So the mourning process in Judaism starts with from death to burial. And that period of time is called aninut. So this individual has no religious obligations except preparing for the funeral. It is of the understanding that this individual cannot focus on anything else, and it should not be expected of them to follow any religious obligations until the funeral happens. And the funeral itself in Judaism needs to take place as soon as possible, usually within 24 hours of the death. So from the time a person passes away till the funeral itself, it's usually either less or 24 hours. It's pretty immediate. And then we have the next part, the Shiva. Can anybody read that? Yeah, Wendy. Here, I'll make it bigger.
No, thank you. That's very nice. Shiva, immediately after the funeral, which happens so close to the time of death, is when the Shiva begins. This is a week of mourning period that the close family need to observe, giving this period of time to focus on the death, on the end of life, on the life and the loss of the family member. It is custom that neighbors and friends provide food to the family so they do not have to focus on preparing meals for themselves and their basic needs are taken care of. In a normal situation as well, a minyan is done in the home and people come to the individual's home to assist and support during this raw period, during the week after the passing. This is also the time that Kaddish is said at every service, which is why a minyan is important and essential for the family. You want me to go on?
Sure.
Shloshim. After the Shiva, the intense period of leaving the world, you have 30 days that you return to the world. However, are not able to listen to music, go to events, celebrations, simchas, concerts. So there is a distinction in your life about what you are able to go and where you are able to go, what you are able to do and where you are able to go. In a case when losing a sibling, spouse, or child, this is when the mourning period officially ends after 30 days.
Yeah.
For parents, it is 11 months. And during this time, you continue the mourning process and saying Kaddish. Afterwards, you move on and go back to normal life, and the opportunities to say Kaddish is on the yurtzeit and holiday when Yizkor is said.
So I purposely am emphasizing the fact that in the case of losing a child, it's only 30 days. So, I know that I'm aware, in when they mention often in shul, like the case that's most often experienced of saying Yizkor is when a parent passes away, and then you have 11 months to go through the process. But I also want to share that it's only 30 days. So I want to ask before we actually conclude and connect it, what do you think about the mourning process in Judaism, whether you've experienced it or not? Either your own experience, how has it been going through this process in this way, or what are your thoughts about it?
Well, it was designed by some very important, intelligent people. I know when I came to B'nai first time saying Kaddish for my mother, and people said, "Did you join a bereavement group?" And I said, "Yeah, every morning at 7:15," and I'm still joining it. I mean, that's true. I mean, the fact that you have a minyan and you go to say Kaddish every time is really a transitionary experience that helps you get through everything. At least I found that.
Thank you, Steve.
Yeah, I think it's the original support group. I think you're absolutely right when you say that. It was the original support group. I think that for Jews, this is really a high point. I think we do death very, very well. It makes a lot of sense. Before, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross defined stages of grieving, I mean, we have those 3 distinct, or 4. I didn't really realize, thank you for that, because I didn't realize that the period between death and the funeral was a period in and of itself. That's something I didn't know. It makes sense, but I didn't know it. But certainly Shiva, Shloshim, and then 11 months makes a lot of sense because the rawness dissipates and you're able to do anything. I will share one thing is that I was fairly young when my mother died. And I thought, oh my God, 11 months, really? I can't, I don't have a big social life, but I need something. And, to not go to a party it just seemed overkill. And then I realized, yeah, it was protection. I didn't want to hear music. I didn't want to turn on the radio. It was protection, and I had a reason. I had backup, rather.
Yeah. And it passes very quickly, doesn't it? In retrospect.
In retrospect, yeah. But when I was young, it was looming, and I didn't see how it was going to work.
Yeah.
Live and learn.
Thank you for sharing, Wendy. Leslie, do you want to add something?
Well, yes, I was thinking how each of us, it's unique, because each person you lose is unique. And another way of expressing what Steve and Wendy were just expressing is how important ritual that gives structure to that time for you can be very helpful. And like on the yard site of my mother died in 2008. And on her yard site each year, it's very helpful for me to light the memorial candle and to sit at a shulchan, at a table, and tell my mother what's happened in the last year, like with her grandchildren and, the passage of time. And it's like a ritual, because if she were alive, she would have experienced those things. And so it's a very helpful ritual for me to do that on the anniversary of her death.
Yeah. Thank you, Leslie.
Mm-hmm.
Does anyone else want to add or share? So I'll also add that for a lot of people who would say not involved in Jewish life, often the time that they become involved once again is the passing of someone in their family and when they feel obligated to say Kaddish. So I've had students myself who told me that they returned to B'nai or came to B'nai because of the passing of someone, and they become involved once again in some sort of Jewish life. So it's also, like you all were saying, opportunity to create that community once again, or to create that framework and group of support when you need it the most. So yeah, Wendy.
One more thing is that you mentioned that I think that ritual and expectations, people know what to do. I mean, if in fact you're lucky enough to be part of a community, people know what to do. People know what to expect. People know that there's a meal sign up. People know that things fall in, you wouldn't ask the person who's mourning, you'll ask somebody close to them. How can we send meals? It's all very, very easy. You know that I'm going to come during the day because there aren't that many people there. I know you've got a minyan at night, so I'm going to come during the day when we can sit and talk. Those are the kind of things that people know when we all follow the same rules. As we become more accepting of everybody's choices and what everybody does, and people tend to follow the same rules necessary. I don't know how to say it. I can use this past year as an example because nobody knew what to do.
Right.
We're not giving meals. We're not having minions. Nobody knew what to do. And we had to figure that out as we go along. That was kind of easy because there was a reason for it. But when you've got people who have different levels of observance, and instead of saying Shiva, we have visitation. And I'm not criticizing.
Right.
I'm not criticizing because I think it's people do what they're comfortable with. But I'm saying for a community, it makes it harder to know what to do or what the expectations are.
Yeah. Actually, you're absolutely right, Wendy. I mean, I unfortunately had the occasion to attend a number of, funerals, well, not funerals, but shivas for the Orthodox community. And they're very different than Shiva from B'nai. I mean, Orthodox community, they know exactly what to do. They know exactly how to act. B'nai sometimes, and other, Reform congregations beyond B'nai, it almost seems like it's an Irish wake, where it's an entertainment. And I personally don't find that attractive, but that's what people do.
Thank you for sharing. Appreciate that. And it goes to show that mean, I feel like what we've all said here is that there's something comforting in the ritual and the tradition. And also the fact that you know what to expect, you know how to act. I was going to add as well that in Israel, the period of the Shiva is automatically given off. And in certain places, certain workplaces, they'll actually give you a Shiva pack. I remember I was working in the Knesset, and it's the Israeli parliament, so they gave, bottles of water and baskets of food, and, it was something that's a part of Israeli lifestyle. And I'll say as well that part of my contract as a shlicha was, if God forbid somebody of my first degree passed away, they would immediately pay for my flight to go to Israel. I would have time in Israel. So it's very much a part of, my contract, right? Like, it's talking about Israel, the Jewish state, and it's a part of, the experience in the workplace. And then I find that very unique as well. Unfortunately, there was a shlicha recently who had to experience that her father passed away. But it made me realize how unique it is that, the workplace supports and assists to that. And, so I think it's a very unique thing with working in Israel. So I want to now connect this idea and your experiences now to Aaron. So, a few weeks ago, we heard the story of Nadav and Avihu, the two sons of Aaron, who went too close, whatever reason you choose, that settles well. It's a story that's sometimes very hard for me to deal with. And they suddenly died. And Aaron, his response was being silent, and he didn't respond to it. And he went through his mourning or grief period. And we have a pause. We have a pause of the Parsha, and then we have two Parshot in the middle are talking about, leprosy, purity, but as if we're telling a story, we're having this background, but Aaron is mourning in the meantime. And then all of a sudden they get a mention once again, as if it's the end of the Shloshim, right? This is the last day that he's saying Kaddish, that he's mourning, and then you move on, right? That and it's not only you move on, but we have the most important day of the year, that it's his obligation to be leading the people of Israel, that he goes into the Holy of Holies, and he has this whole routine. And there's this incredible song that we sing in Kippur. It goes, Emet man nehedar haya kohen gadol. So it's truth that it was amazing that when the high priest would come out of the Holy of Holies in peace and without any harm. And so that is really the highlight and the most important day of the year of Aaron, of the high priest. And he does that immediately after the end of his mourning period, which really goes to show that once that mourning period ends, you remember, but you move on, and you do the most important day of the year. So I just like connecting it to Aaron's personal story and what he went through, and how that connects to Judaism very much so. And that when somebody passes in our life, when we have a loss, we take them with us and we remember them, and they're a part of our lives, but we also want to live life to the fullest. We move on, in a sense. And I think that's very much a part of Judaism, that the mourning period lasts for a very defined period of time. And before I would like to hear your thoughts about that idea and what you think, if you have anything to add, I want to add one more thing. This past week, as Wendy mentioned in the beginning, was Yom HaZikaron and Yom HaAtzmaut, Israel's Memorial Day and Israel's Independence Day. And that same kind of transition actually happens there as well. So in Israel's Memorial Day, almost everybody, unfortunately, has had some sort of loss, either with a soldier who has passed away, or killed, basically, or somebody who's been killed in a terror attack. So those are the two groups of people we think about on this day, and it's a very solemn day. Most people are in cemeteries. Most people are standing next to graves of people they know or don't know. It's a very sad day. I don't know who was there, but if you were by chance in my transition ceremony, I was exactly talking about this point, but how can we move on from Yom HaZikaron, from Israel's Memorial Day, to Israel's Independence Day? And the answer is that we do it because we remember these people. They are a part of our lives, but we move on. we live life to the fullest because of them, because of their sacrifice, and recognizing what they have done for us to be in Israel. And that's why it makes sense in a way that Yom HaAtzmaut is the day after Yom HaZikaron. And it's, in a way, it's so much more powerful because of that as well. Going from the grief to the celebration in pretty immediate transition. So I want to share a song that I really, really liked from this transition about Yom HaZikaron to Yom HaAtzmaut. It was shared by the World Zionist Organization, and they called it a Havdalah, but from Yom HaZikaron to Yom HaAtzmaut. Havdalah is what we do, the ceremony we do Motzei Shabbat on Saturday night, ending Shabbat and beginning the week. And again, also a pretty immediate transition. All you need to do is drink grape juice or wine, bless on a candle, smell something, and it's like, here you go, you can say hello to your phone again. So at least that's for me. I'm like, antsy phone. Okay, so I'm going to share the song, and then I'd be happy to hear your thoughts about what I just said. One moment, I need to make sure I'm sharing my sound. Okay.
ראשון לציון הנה הנה, לירושלים מבשרת, ענה אדוני יושיענה,
ענה אדוני הצליחנה,
הצליחנו, הצלח מדינתנו,
הצלח חיילנו וחיילותינו,
הצלח קהילותינו בישראל ובתפוצות, ושלח ברכה, רווחה והצלחה בכל מעשה ידינו. התנערי מעפר קומי, לבשי בגדי תפארתך עמי, על יד בן ישי בית הלכי, קרובה אל נפשי גאלה. זה היום עשה אדוני, נגילה ונשמחה בו. זה היום עשה אדוני, נגילה ונשמחה בו.
לילה לילה שמחה גדולה, לילה
הלילה לילה לילה שמחה גדולה, הלילה 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 שמחה גדולה, הלילה 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 שמחה גדולה, הלילה. התעוררי התעוררי, כי באורך קומי אורי, אורי אורי שיר דברי, כבוד אדוני עלייך מילה. זה היום עשה אדוני, נגילה ונשמחה בו. זה היום עשה אדוני, נגילה ונשמחה בו.
לילה 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 שמחה גדולה, לילה הלילה
אלוקיים לכבוד ירושלים.
שמחה גדולה הלילה,
הלילה, הלילה, שמחה גדולה הלילה, הלילה,
So that was also the Jewish Agency building that's in Jerusalem, and they were showing, they're showing them in the same place as like the picture from, I guess, 73 years before, or whatever they have, the oldest video footage they have. So I'd be happy to hear your thoughts and questions if you have any, but that's all that I have for today.
Mm-hmm. Okay. We have.
Does anybody have thoughts about my conclusion? If it makes sense, doesn't make sense, if you agree, don't agree with it?
Yes, Netta, I found that very meaningful. I never thought about things in the context, that you were talking about today, about that the duration was about Shloshim for Aaron and the transition and of his life as a priest and a father. Mm-hmm. I found that very meaningful, and it's so logical. And to my way of thinking, one of the reasons that that transition from Yom HaZikaron to Yom HaTzmaut is that when you fully experience the morning, and I'm reminded of what Wendy was talking about earlier about Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's defining the stages of grief and following the ritual and fully acknowledging during that time period, whatever that time period is devoted to who you lose in your life. Mm-hmm. Really experiencing the morning enables you to more fully move on and to celebrate the joy of being alive. And you'll always have those people in your heart that live on within you.
Thank you so much, Leslie. I appreciate that. Very nice. Yes, Lynn.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, why do you think there's such a big difference in time of mourning for a parent and for a child?
Good question.
So John, my husband, recently read a book about Jewish mourning and the whole process. And the idea is that your parents are your teachers and you owe them your life, but also all the values, education, everything you've received is from your parents. So you have this extra, as if respect for their last way. And that's why you add that time. And it seems weird because it's, you do 30 days for your own child, right? And that's really difficult, which is why I kind of wanted to emphasize that, because I feel that I can't even imagine bearing a child. I think it's horrible. And it's also only 30 days. Same thing with the spouse, also 30 days, right? It's, very close people to you. Yeah, Wendy, did you want to add to that?
I always heard that it was of a historical nature. So in the olden days, whatever that was, people lost children, our life expectancy, what it was now. And that in our tradition, we were not meant to spend our whole lives in mourning. If you limit it to 30 days, you could lose a lot of children, God forbid, but and still have a life. Whereas one has one mother and one father, and that's the covet that you give them. But we're not meant to be. That made sense to me. I don't know whether it's true, but it makes sense to me because, right, could there be anything worse than losing a child?
Could make it softer.
Yeah. Yeah, Nancy.
Well, and because of your last statement, Wendy, I believe that I don't know why that period is so short, and maybe it's because you will always mourn that child.
Yeah.
So, What can I say? I mean, I don't think there's a mother alive that has lost a child that doesn't feel that mourning in her heart the rest of her life.
Yeah.
Yeah. I say even worse beyond that is if you lose a child that's less than 30 days old, if I recall correctly, you don't even mourn for that child. There's no Shiva. There's no Shloshim. There's nothing. And that might have been because the life expectancy and the loss of children back in the olden days was very short.
Right. That you had a lot of, children. And you say it in English, Hebrew. I know this saying in Hebrew, but I don't know how to say it in English. Basically, but a lot of children who passed away. So, yeah.
Neonatal mortality.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
And now that
saying in Hebrew. What?
And now that sounds so foreign to us. How could you not grieve for someone that you carried for 9 months or even, 6 months? And I think, I was saying that for Shiva, sometimes we've evolved and made things less clear. But on the other hand, I think people that are developing traditions for the kind of neonatal loss that you're talking about, or early infant loss, or stillbirth or whatever, I think people are developing those rituals, and I think that that's a good thing.
That's healthy. I agree.
On one hand, on the other hand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's interesting because this parsha doesn't really talk about so much death, process, etc. This was developed by the rabbis afterwards, but I just find it interesting that we had that pause and we had the mention, and we talk about completely different things, but we're able to have this whole conversation. Something that touches upon all of our lives at the end of the day at some point. I just think it gives a personal connection to the parsha, and basically makes Aaron, human in that case, somebody you can relate to. So thank you so much for adding everything, for sharing your personal experiences and thoughts. It really is a meaningful way to start the day and go into Shabbat. And I really appreciate it.
No, thank you. And you took us someplace unexpected, and that was kind of very interesting. Thank you. Thank you. I just want to remind everybody that Steve is presenting on our next gathering, which is, and I'm looking at my calendar.
I think it's May 7th.
May 7th. Okay, so it's not this coming week, but in 2 weeks.
Right.
So tell your friends. If I can just give another plug, I don't know whether anybody's read, and it's kind of tangential to this discussion. I don't know whether anybody